Welcome to Backstage with Becca B with special guest Ali Ewoldt. Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Backstage with Becca B. On this episode, she was a fan favorite Christine in Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. Other roles on her resume have included Cosette on the Les Miserables National Tour and on Broadway, Maria on the international tour of West Side Story, and an understudy for Tuptum in The King and I on Broadway. Please welcome Ali Ewoldt.
Hello, hi.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Becca?
Good. Thank you for joining me on this.
Of course, nice to virtually meet you over the
Yeah,
internet.
nice to virtually meet you too. Your resume is so impressive, so I'm so excited to talk to you about theater.
Oh, yay, thanks.
I was looking at your resume last night and I already knew it was impressive, but I was just reminding myself, I guess, by looking at your resume.
Thank
of
you.
how impressive it was. First off, how have you been doing during this time? Because it's been a weird time and everything's been changing constantly. I feel it's even during a time when we've been all locked inside.
Yeah. It's a great question. It's hard to say. I think given all of the circumstances, I would say that I'm feeling very grateful. My parents are all vaccinated. They've been doing well. They live close by, so I've been able to see them. I just got my second shot last Monday, so I'm a week away from being fully vaccinated. My little doggie, Mia, is here, and she's very happy.
Oh,
She definitely has been enjoying the fact that I'm home all the time, so
yeah.
that's totally a perk. But otherwise, I've been able to work some, mostly from my computer or singing to the phone on my camera, which, is not my favorite thing, but it's better than not being able to do anything. So, we're just sort of waiting to see what is around the bend. And again, in the grand scheme of things, feeling very fortunate.
Yes, and it's soon stuff is gonna happen again, it seems like. So,
Yes,
we see the light at the end of the tunnel. The dogs are
indeed.
gonna be very upset, speaking of dogs, when we all have to go back out and do stuff normally again. They're gonna be like,
Yeah.
"What?"
I know already sometimes I'll leave to, do some errands or whatever, and she'll just look at me like, "We're supposed to be together all the time. This is the new thing. I don't understand. How could you possibly? What are you
Where do
talking
you
about?
think you're going?
How dare?"
Where in the world do you think you're going? Unexcusable. So, getting into theater, have you always known that you wanted to have a career in theater and entertain people for a living?
Yes and no. I definitely fell in love with theater at a young age. I started taking dance class when I was probably 2.5, voice lessons at 10 years old, and I saw my first Broadway show when I was 8. I saw A Chorus Line, totally fell in love with it. Probably wildly inappropriate that I was seeing a chorus line at age 8, but all the other stuff went over my head that I
Yeah.
that I wasn't meant to understand. And then had this amazing high school performing arts sort of program. It was a small public high school about 45 minutes north of New York City called Pleasantville High School, and I had this amazing teacher, Dr. Valentino, who really had already been working at the school for about 30 years and had built up this amazing musical theater thing where we did one play a year and everybody was involved. My junior year, I got to play my first lead and I was opposite the quarterback of the football team. So
Ooh,
everybody
cool.
was kind of involved in it, and it made musical theater and theater in general feel like this very sort of worthy, amazing medium that demanded respect and hard work and diligence and all these things. However, somehow I knew that, the business was very difficult. And I decided when it came time to look for colleges that I wanted to be able to study other things and potentially find something else that I was similarly passionate about. And so I had a bit of what I call my denial phase. When I went to Yale University, I ended up being a psychology major in a liberal arts program, which essentially was, the major that I was interested in. Obviously, it has a lot of resonance with acting, right? Understanding
Yeah.
why people do what they do. And then I was able to perform extracurricularly constantly and take voice lessons and do summer stock in the summers. And so when I was a senior, I happened to do a production of The Marriage of Figaro with Yale Opera with the graduate program, and I had a teeny tiny role, like little mini, not even an aria song. And thankfully, somebody was in the audience who happened to be friends with somebody in the cast who happened to be a New York casting or New York agent. And she, right, it was amazing. And she came up to her friend afterwards and said, "Hey, Ali sounds like, maybe she could do musical theater." And he said, "Actually, that's what she's interested in." And so they had me come in and audition for the agency. And after I graduated, they started sending me out on audition. So it was very sort of lucky circumstance. And I felt like, obviously in those moments, I had not found something that I was similarly passionate about, and I indeed at least needed to, give it a try to be a performer, and have been pretty fortunate since, ebbs and flows, but generally great.
I noticed you majored in psychology, and I was gonna ask like what the story behind that was, and like I was also gonna ask when you figured out like you could be in musical theater as a career. So I guess like someone like kind of saw you there and was like, she can definitely do this as a career.
Yeah, it was a huge boost to have, a real professional in the world kind of, validate what I hoped to maybe be true about, about me being in the business. So that was very, very handy. But yeah, the psychology was, I think I was drawn to it because I was interested in the coursework. I was interested in, human beings and their behavior. And also, honestly, it was one of the lighter majors at Yale, as opposed to some of my amazing roommates who were doing all of this like very in-depth academic work, and had all these like very dense double majors and incredible amounts of reading and all of these work studies and things. And I found that I could actually get my coursework done and also go off and perform in a random show in the dining hall or in the rare books library or somewhere else on campus where they were making art.
And maybe get at least like 2 hours of sleep or something.
Yeah, sleep seemed very unimportant back then. I don't really know how I functioned, but sleep
But
has since become way more important.
I mean, I feel like college students, like just the adrenaline like rushes through all the time, and you're like, what is sleep at this point?
Yes, yes, agreed. Or like, I became very good at napping. I did a lot of I remember I would be like working on a paper late at night and then just go take like a 20-minute nap at like midnight maybe, and then wake back up and continue on. And that was sort of how my all-nighters went. There were,
Yeah,
strategic naps in place.
the power naps.
Yes, indeed,
How
indeed.
do you think, because I'm sure psychology kind of has helped you in the long run with theater. It's such like, I mean, it's such an important study. How do you think it's helped you in your mindset going into the professional world of theater?
Yeah, I think it's multifold, right? Like part of it is sort of understanding myself and understanding, the ways in which I need to work on my self-care or keeping myself in like a good mental place and understanding kind of the world around. I think there's also sort of the asset of having studied something else, which meant that I was surrounded by other people that were not necessarily performers, and to just have the perspective that as much as I love performing and musical theater, it's not the only thing in the entire world. And in fact, it really actually helps me as a performer to have interests all throughout the world, to be interested in, in how people are functioning, because more often than not, we're not playing actors, we're playing human beings that have other jobs. And so
Yes.
really just even having a foot and a sense of kind of reality about the greater world is super useful. And then just that curiosity about why people are behaving the way that they are. I mean, I think one of my favorite examples is going into Phantom. I had seen the show as a child. Obviously, the role of Christine is incredibly iconic. We all have a picture in our mind's eye of like what that means, and how she's sort of stately and lifts her arms and sings these gorgeous high notes and has sort of wide eyes looking around, and the Phantom is there. But when I was going into the role, I thought I wanted to go beyond just sort of what I was seeing physically and really understand, why she is behaving in this fashion. And for me, it was, about reading the source material, but also just about trying to understand, to me, Christine is just operating from this immense place of grief, right? She's lost her father, who was her person, the one that she always counted on, and he was tied to music. And so, in sort of the wake of his death, she's open to taking voice lessons from this disembodied voice in her dressing room, right? Like, because that's part of it is like, how was Christine even open to this in the first place? And I think it's understanding that, it's understanding her cultural background, which is that she's from Sweden. There they talk about how they're really into these ghost stories, these stories of the North, right? So she's primed to believe that ghosts are present and a real thing and could potentially be her father. And and she's sort of like separate from the company because she's a bit other, because she's from a different cultural background. And so all of those things to me it made it really interesting because I could understand why Christine was making the choices that she was making, why she was drawn to the Phantom, why she was choosing to be with him, and sort of how she kind of is coming through her grief and dealing with all that as the story unfolds. And none of that is to take away from the original blocking or sort of like the majesty of it and the beautiful spectacle. But it was really interesting to me to make her a human being who has a real background, a real like full emotional life, and gets to make decisions and all that. And I think that's all tied in with just really understanding, why people operate the way that they do.
Even more, like, you made her even more three-dimensional than she already was through knowing psychology and the study of psychology.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I'm gonna get more into Phantom later, but before I get into your first Broadway show, I want to ask, what's your favorite show you've done regionally? Because regional theater, I feel like we don't talk about it enough. I feel like people don't talk about it enough because people are like, oh, Broadway, like everything Broadway. Broadway's amazing, but also regional theater deserves some attention here.
Yes, totally agree. I was talking to some students from Webster University last night, and they were asking me, and I have had an amazing, long-standing relationship with the Muni in St. Louis, and I'm just such a fan of that theater. It's this crazy outdoor space, 11,000 seats outside. The stage is completely outside, and they put on these amazing productions, and we have maybe 10 days of rehearsal. And beyond that, like they have been willing to cast me in parts that I don't know that I would even cast myself as. And so I got to play Philia in Forum, which was
Ooh.
so much fun. It was so delightful. And it was actually while I was doing Phantom, I got to take a leave of absence to go, and take a couple of weeks to go to St. Louis and do the show. And Philia was amazing because she gets to smile the entire time. She lives in this very sort of like simple and happy place, and that's where she operates, and that's where her comedy comes from, and that's where her kindness and sweetness come from. And so it was just such a delight to like get to smile for for 10
Right?
days with this amazing company, and where everything is sort of like thrown together, but they make such high quality amazing shows. And the audiences in St. Louis are incredible, and they're super loyal, and they come and they support, and they're open to all of this beautiful art. And I can't say enough good things about the Muni. It's really, really awesome.
And I feel like those big regional theaters, what makes regional theaters so special is those big regional theaters in those cities. Like, that's the people who live in those cities, that's their Broadway.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what's amazing about those theaters too is how they have all these training programs for kids. And so you get to watch, part of what's cool about working at the Muni is you see the Muni teens and the Muni kids, and they put on these great performances before the main stage shows, and you can tell that they're getting this, this great education, whether or not they decide to go into musical theater or not, but sort
Yeah.
of this love and appreciation for the arts. And that brings in the community too, because all of their families are there watching, and they get to participate in the main stage shows. And I love that idea of sort of making theater accessible in these regional places, and really kind of bringing in all sorts of people from the community.
And that's the best way to learn from kids, to learn by doing and to learn from maybe older cast members in the show who have the experience that they want to get to and they want to one day have.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I also noticed that you were in Hyperion, the Hyperion production of Aladdin, and I want to touch on that quickly. What was it like playing, honestly, my favorite Disney princess in a show at California Adventure and getting to like perform the show for kids who are at the park and coming for a day of fun at the park with their family? Like, truly at the end of the day, I feel like Hyperion Theater, like that's more for kids than maybe like the tour of Aladdin or like the tour of Frozen, you know?
It was a dream job. It was my first job out of college that I booked through this agent that I had gotten in this production of Marriage of Figaro. And I was cast as the Jasmine understudy slash body double, which meant that I was in the ensemble, obviously understudying Jasmine, but I got to fly on the carpet. So in this production of Aladdin, the real Aladdin and Jasmine sort of sink beneath the stage at the top of a whole new world. And the first verse is the body doubles flying on this magic carpet that's like 3 stories in the air. And we're harnessed in. And because of that, it's exactly that. Like we got to get so close to the balconies. And I just remember, all of these like little children who were so, so excited and were waving and saying, "Oh, Jasmine, Jasmine." And I had like the beautiful opportunity of getting to sort of give them attention and reach out to them. And I'll never forget there was this one little girl once who was just screaming her face off, was so excited. Was like, "Jasmine, Jasmine, Jasmine." And I reached over to her and smiled and she went,
Star,
it was
star.
just totally like her mind completely exploded in that moment of like, this
Hi
princess
to
looked at
me.
me. Yes, it was so satisfying. It was so amazing. And I grew up as a total, Disney fan, Disney kid. So we also had access to the park because we were performing in the park, but we were union employees of AGVA. And so we didn't quite have all the same rules that normal cast members at Disneyland have. And so we were able to, go and ride on the rides. We had access to, to going into California Adventure and Disneyland and bringing our friends and family in too. And so I got to watch Fantasmic like a million times because I'm totally obsessed with Fantasmic. It's so great. And so all of those things were just like truly magical. And then on top of that, to have it was a great job. I worked 5 days a week. I had health insurance. I had these amazing colleagues who I actually like. What was really mind blowing about the whole experience was when I was growing up, I'm half Filipino, and so I had watched these two women who are Filipino American on television shows. I watched Dee Dee Magno Hall, who was on the Mickey Mouse Club, and I watched Jenny Kwan, who was on California Dreams. And I got to Aladdin, and I was understudying those two women who I had grown up completely idolizing, who had even like, made
Oh
me
my
believe
goodness.
that it was possible for me to be a performer. And I was sharing a dressing room with them. And so we were hanging out, and they are tremendous performers and just the kindest, most lovely people ever. And I remember, I was fresh and new and didn't really know anything, had never worn a wig before. And they taught me how to pin curl my hair. They gave me all these tips when I had my put-in rehearsal to play Jasmine, my rehearsal where I was in full costume and all that stuff. They sat with me and really talked me through, different pitfalls in the show and what to look out for and sort of tips and tricks and all of this. And they didn't have to do any of that. That was not part of their job description. But they just sort of had it in them to be so open and kind. And I think that more than anything, sort of that work environment has informed so much about what I know, to be true or how I would like to operate in my own work environments when I have understudies and with different company members and all of that.
Probably gave you such high standards going forward too. You were like, everyone better be like this, and all the cast I'm in.
Indeed, though I don't know. It's hard to live up to those two. They were magical dream humans. They're so awesome.
Yes, I mean, I feel like most Broadway people are like fantastic people, but like you're gonna get your shows where you're like, oh, this isn't like the show that was perfect, literally perfect. I guess
Indeed.
in every
Indeed.
industry, you're gonna get that group of people that maybe not as perfect as one.
Right. Yes.
So your Broadway debut was Cosette and Les Mis, but before you made your Broadway debut as Cosette, you were on tour as in the ensemble, and then you got bumped up to Cosette lead on the tour. What was your audition like for Les Mis?
So my first audition for the tour, I remember I had just come back from working for Disney in Japan. So after Aladdin, I worked for Disney in Japan doing a Broadway review show. Did not get to be a princess, unfortunately, there. But it was still really awesome. And I came back, and my agency, this agency that I had been with, the head of the office had unfortunately passed away. My contact there had moved on to a different career. And so I remember sending them a message being like, I'm not sure if anybody here remembers me, but I've been in Japan, but I'm coming back. And I would love to keep working with you if possible. And thankfully, somebody responded and said, yes, of course. And actually, we have this audition for you for the Les Mis tour. And, I was completely obsessed with Les Mis as a child. I mean, there's evidence on the internet about this. And I had the whole thing memorized and was like totally, totally obsessed with the show. So of course I was totally freaking out. And I remember I went in, it was a quick audition. I think it was at Ripley Greer Studios, one of the audition studios in New York. And they had me sing A Heart Full of Love, and then In My Life, and then A Heart Full of Love, and then the modulation of A Heart Full of Love, where it in the second act where she goes up to the sea. And so I sort of went through all of that. They were very nice. And then I left and didn't hear a thing for months and months. And I was off doing some summer stock, and I actually had booked a short national tour of The King and I, playing Tuptim, and was very excited about that. And my agents called and basically said, Les Mis has called, and there's an opening on the tour for a Cosette understudy, and they're wondering if you are available. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, but also I have this King and I job where I get to play a principal. Like, shouldn't I be doing that? And my agents thankfully were like, absolutely not. You should take Les Mis. Les Mis is the thing. It doesn't matter if you're in the ensemble. You're like, Les Mis is important.
Yeah.
Go do Les Mis. And it was sound advice. It was very good advice on their end. And so they didn't even have me re-audition. It was just that one tiny little thing, and then they sort of brought me into the company. Thankfully, I was able to do the job. Um, and then while I was on tour, they sat us down, months into the tour, and this was the third national tour, so it had come from the original Broadway production of Les Mis, so it had been out for many, 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 many years, and I had some cast members that had been on that tour for like a decade at that point. And so
Speaks
they
to the
sat us
culture.
all down. Yes, it was an amazing, amazing job.
Yeah.
And they said, so we have some news. There will be a revival of Les Mis on Broadway,
Oh,
and we're closing this tour that you're on, but you all can audition for the revival if you want. Which, as you can imagine, was not really news that was taken super well, right? Like, that was essentially telling all of us that we had to re-audition for our jobs. And yes, exciting, but also that our jobs wouldn't exist anyway. It was a lot of news sort of wrapped up into one. And so while we were on tour, they said we were in between Cleveland and Cincinnati, and they said what we'll do is we'll take your luggage from Cleveland to Cincinnati, and if you want to audition, you can fly to New York on that day off. You can all audition that day, and then you'll fly from there to Cincinnati. So I basically, showed up at this rehearsal studio in New York with my entire Les Mis cast, or almost everybody wanted to audition, and we kind of just one at a time went in and did this material that we'd been doing, and that was kind of wild. And then I got back to Cincinnati, and we were on tour, and I got a call from my agent saying they want you to come back to New York for a callback, which was amazing, but also like super awkward because the callback was for Cosette. I was still understudying Cosette at the time. I was the only one in my company that was called for that callback time. And so I was trying to kind of sneak away and not let anyone know, because also, it's just sort of awkward on so many levels. Um, and unfortunately, I had my callback, which was incredible. It was a very sort of a wild experience. I got pooped on by a bird on my way
oh, good.
to the audition, which I hear is good luck, which kind
Yeah.
of panned out to be as much. But it was pretty mortifying, and in some ways, actually, ended up being this amazing icebreaker because, I was at in the restroom, and I met Leah Michelle and said, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you. I'm so sorry a bird just pooped on me." And the same with, Megan McGinnis and Telly Leung and all these people because they were pairing up Cosette's and Marius's and Eponine's. And also I walked into this final callback, the first time that I'd been in a final callback for a Broadway show, and to explain to everyone that I just had this experience with this bird. But I think in some ways it kind of, it was sort of a great icebreaker. And so we had, we got sort of paired up in different ways. And Adam Jacobs,
Yeah.
who had been on my tour and had left the tour, was there. And so it was really fun for us to get to, because we had already done the show together. And so we had sort of a fun chemistry and got to play and even like, throw in some of the blocking that we knew from the tour, which I think all of that sort of set me up for being more comfortable than I would
Yeah.
have been otherwise. But then I missed my flight on the way back, and so I ended up having to tell my cast members where I
Oh
was.
no!
I
They're like,
know,
where
my
are
mom,
you?
like, well, I came back to New York for this thing.
For
Um,
nothing.
yeah,
They're like, oh, okay.
just a little thing. And so then I went back to Cincinnati, and it wasn't, I think it was a couple of weeks later that they actually called me to say that I had booked it. But it was a really interesting journey.
But like, what a dream come true to like not only book the lead on Broadway, but to also be understudying the role on the tour. Like Les Mis, as you mentioned, iconic show, and it's been going on for years and years. It like I feel like everyone hears Castle on the Cloud as a child, and they're like, okay, I'm
Right, that's it. Yes. No, I mean really like the job in the ensemble was amazing. It was probably the most fun I've ever had on stage because we got to play all sorts of different characters and things that I wouldn't, as your ingenue, wouldn't usually get to play, right? I was my favorite character I talk about was a little boy who I named Tiny Tim, and he had a unibrow and tooth black, and he would run around like and pick fights with gang members and get into all sorts of trouble with his brother Tam. Tim and Tam would just,
love
run around the barricade. And just,
love it.
so it was so much fun to be part of that show, and I love that show so much, and so it's sort of surreal that that got to be my Broadway debut experience as well.
Do you remember the day you made your Broadway debut as Cosette?
You know, I kind of don't, which is sort of insane, right? Like I feel like the whole thing got like a little. I was so excited, and so it was like and
No.
stressed, and it was like a little bit a little bit of a wash. I mean, just getting I remember that first day of rehearsal, showing up with the cast and being so starstruck. Luckily, I knew a couple of people like Adam and
No. Yeah.
my friend Marissa McGowan. I had a couple of people from the tour that I knew there, but otherwise, it was like it's Daphne Rubin Vega and Norm Lewis and
Oh,
Alex Gemignati and Celia Keenan Bolger. I mean, it was just like it was this like magical dream cast, and I, was definitely like, am I supposed to be here? Are you sure? Are you sure you wanted me? Are you sure that I'm the one who's supposed to be here? But so it was just really cool to get to sort of be in that company and kind of create something with all those amazing people.
how do you get in the headspace when you're working along people you admire to like I mean one maybe not get super starstruck. I'm sure you get starstruck, there's no going around it, but like how do you get in the mind space to like put work first in that situation and not like just like stare at the people you admire and you've seen in shows 100 times.
I mean, it's a challenge, right? Like what I've sort of learned is that we're all humans, and and having been sort of now oddly on the opposite end of that, like it's not it's not out of the realm to go up to someone and say, you know what, I really admire your work and I'm a fan of yours. Like people appreciate that compliment, and somehow it breaks the weird, like I can't possibly talk to you,
Yeah.
even though you're my colleague and you're like up on this pedestal. I think that there is something about if you're leading with sort of kindness and consideration, that you actually can talk, that we all are people.
Yes.
And creating something together. But I think it's, as you said, a lot of it is really just making sure that that I'm doing the work, that I'm doing what we were talking about, of understanding the characters and sort of doing that research and getting into their headspace that way, and making sure that I'm doing everything within my control to tell these stories really well. And then, that puts me in a great place to be able to collaborate with other people because I know that I'm bringing, my best work, and then we can work on things together and kind of make something together to try and just like get out of my own head and instead focus on the thing that we're creating.
And Cosette is such an iconic character too, and it had been before you were even cast as Cosette. How did you make Cosette your own when you played her as the lead on Broadway?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it too was that same idea of, I love going back to a source material. So I went back and read, Les Mis, which is not a short novel. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff about, Cosette's time in the convent, how she felt, so isolated, the ways that she wanted to be out into the world, her sort of nuanced journey throughout it. I think what's challenging about playing the adult Cosette is that the young Cosette has Castle on Cloud, has all of these moments, and then there's sort of a jump in time. And so I had to really also understand, what it was like to be that child version before I get taken by Valjean and all of that stuff too. And then a lot of it too is, thankfully they were very open to me just sort of letting it be my personality within the character of Cosette as opposed to, so again, this idea of this like very sort of like elegant and staid ingenue and all of that stuff and kind of reach beyond what that is. And Adam and I were able to kind of develop this, we're like the two of them, Marius and Cosette, at the end of the day are very inexperienced and very nervous and in love and really dorky and really silly, and so we were able to kind of embrace that, what it would be like, to see somebody and to have no experience and have no idea how to talk to them, but to desperately want to and to let it be sort of, young and truthful and have this kind of core of like of honesty as opposed to just the idea of of what these two characters should be like.
I have an interesting question based on something you said in that answer. It's so Marius and Cosette, they kind of just see each other for 1 second and like literally fall in love based on that 1 second. Why do you think Marius fell in love with Cosette during that 1 second, as opposed to like Eponine, who he had like basically known for a lot longer?
That is a very good question. I mean, I must admit, when I was a child, if I could have chosen, I definitely would have been Team Eponine. I mean, I think that that's pretty universal,
Yeah.
because we see, what a full person she is and how they have this friendship and how she's like right under his nose and how does he not notice? And I think it's that thing of like, A, it's a dramatic story.
Yeah.
But B, like, the more the more experience I have, love is fairly inexplicable. Attraction is kind of, it's just this thing that we don't necessarily have a lot of science to understand exactly how things happen, or there isn't necessarily a perfect formula for why people will be drawn to each other, or not. And, that can be very heartbreaking if you're somebody like Eponine, and work out kind of well if you're somebody like Cosette. And I think that, that I have to kind of believe in the sense of the drama that there was something within their souls that was kind of just that they were drawn to each other, for various reasons, and really kind of connected on something more than just a physical attraction, right? Like there was something
Yeah.
kind of in their essence that really kind of sparked this love very quickly.
It's literally a love at first sight thing. It's very cute, and I feel like in the play, in the musical, it's shown so much better than like in the movie that's out that a bunch of people have seen. Like it's shown that Marius is like super young and super dorky, as you mentioned, and
Hmm.
like they care. Like in the movie, he's a little more sophisticated, and you're like, okay, well, he's not a young kid, but in the musical, it just like, okay, I can get behind this a little more. Kind of love at first sight,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
in the Broken Jokes. It. I didn't know that before last night that Adam Jacobs was your Marius in the show, which I found interesting.
Yes, I adore that man. He's so wonderful. It's fun because we're both half Filipino too, so we sort of had that connection already going into it. And talk about like just smart. I mean, he's good at everything. I remember before, when I was in the ensemble, there was a moment on the barricade, when other things were happening, and I would sit. Part of my track was sitting next to him and our friend Charlie. And the two of them had been on the tour for a while and were playing some sort of word game that I never was able to wrap my head around because it was way over my head. And it was just, it was just so like sort of like smart and nuanced. But it was really fun. And Adam and I, have always sort of had this great friendship, which I think makes for a really wonderful sort of work chemistry environment. Because we really trust each other and are able to kind of read each other very well, and have been able to do concerts and different events together since, and just love collaborating with each other.
I was gonna say on YouTube, there's a bunch of stuff of you two like working and doing duets together.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
mean, you can tell there's a trust and there's like a bond between there's like a trusting element and bonds there. Like
yeah,
they
absolutely,
special
absolutely.
work
He's
with each other.
indeed.
So you've been on some tours. Before I get into Phantom, you've been on some tours, and touring can't be easy. Like you're traveling and performing 8 times a week. What makes you say yes to these tours like Les Mis, West Side Story, King and I? What makes you say yes repeatedly to tours?
I had such a great time on all of those, but it is exactly as you're saying. It's really challenging. There more often than not, if you're doing one week at a time sit downs, your day off is your travel day, and that's not really a day off. Getting on an airplane and packing bags and having to pull the bags down and put them in a car, like that's it's not terribly restful. Um, but I think in each instance, the draw of the show and of the role was so strong. Getting to do Les Mis, getting to play Maria in West Side Story, on this, like it was our first national of of the most recent, or not the most recent, the revival before this one. Um, and King and I is just something that I've always loved, and that tour I was working with Bayard Lee, who I just admire above and beyond. She's incredible and such a trailblazer, and so amazing. And so I think that there's also a great element of bonding that happens when you're on tour. I think because you become, you are a traveling family, for better or for worse, and you are the people that when you get to any city. And that means that there is like a different level of closeness in within a company. It was also a great opportunity to travel and to see all these places across the country that I might not have been exposed to otherwise. And then additionally, to see my friends and family that were also, sort of scattered across the country, and to really sort of have new experiences that way. But I think it's an interesting thing. I think it always depends kind of on what your life circumstance happens to be at the time. If I had been married with multiple children and a mortgage, maybe not the best choice. But as I didn't have those things, it was a great opportunity to sort of go out and do work, and to see these amazing theaters and these amazing cities, and really get to collaborate with my cast members.
You mentioned seeing the cities. How much time do you get when you're on a tour to actually go see the cities? And how do you like plan that time and like when you're gonna go see the city? Because you're obviously doing press for the show, and you're doing like you're having like premiere nights at the theaters for the show. So you're doing a lot for the show exclusively. And I'm sure you have to like find time for rest there in
Yeah,
between, maybe entertaining yourself and fun.
yeah, no, you're totally right. It's sort of like a balancy budget thing of how, like, what is the one thing that I can see, during my time here. And I was fortunate because since when I was doing West Side, since I was playing a principal role, I didn't have understudy rehearsal during the week. So I did have some day times to go for walks, or to go check out that one museum, or do like the one sort of really exciting thing. Not that cities only have one thing, but kind of pick and
Yeah.
choose. And you're right, and it was very much a sort of a balancing act of when is it best to go out and see things? When should I just really lay low and sleep, and prepare for that show that night? And but thankfully we had enough, sort of, especially in the bigger cities, sort of longer sit downs. We were in Boston for a month or Chicago for a month or San Francisco and LA and all of that. And so that left room for a little more sightseeing time. And then when I actually did an international tour of West Side. And on that one, I was double cast, which was awesome because it meant that I didn't have to be at the theater for half of the shows. And I just had I had to call in, I had a little cell phone, and they would call me in case of emergency. But otherwise, my whatever Tony was also not working that night, and I could sort of go out and really, get to know these different European cities,
Ooh.
and that was awesome. That was really
Did,
cool.
did you do the London stop of that too?
I did not, unfortunately. It was mostly Germany, and we did Switzerland and Amsterdam and Tel Aviv and Japan. And where were we? We were in France and Spain, and I mean, it was pretty cool. We hit a lot of places.
Oh my goodness. What a special thing to get to like bring those shows, those iconic shows, and like that talent that you all have as a cast to the audiences around the world.
It was really cool, especially because, musical theater is such an American art form, right? Like that is our art form.
Yeah.
And so getting to bring it to places that didn't necessarily have kind of that infrastructure already, I think audiences were super excited. And it was wonderful to see sort of how different cultures reacted to the show, what things felt personal to them. I mean, the obvious example is we performed in Tel Aviv for like 3 weeks, I think. And I remember, doing all of this press, and there were people that were telling me that, right at that time, there was a relationship happening in the public eye with a reporter who was Israeli and her love interest who was Palestinian, and sort of how all of that, that went down, and how resonant the themes of, say, a show like West Side Story, where it's about prejudice, it's about not understanding different groups, unfortunately, is very well understood in many places across the world, and they all were able to kind of pull the things that they related to from it.
Wow. Do you have a favorite place across seas that you performed and like a favorite maybe audience reaction you got overseas that's a lot different from American reactions?
Oh gosh. Oh, I love them all so much. I mean, I love performing in Japan. I've gotten to perform in Japan a number of times now. I worked for Disney, then I did the West Side tour there, and just January of 2020, crazy enough, went to do a concert there. And what's been really fun is actually watching sort of their audiences evolve. When I worked for Disney there in 2004, they really didn't know a lot about musical theater. They understood West Side Story, like that movie had kind of opened things up, and they understood sort of the Disney things, but really the old school stuff was not accessible to them. And it's been amazing in the years since, sort of watching how excited Japanese audiences now get about musical theater. That also has been true, obviously working at Phantom of the Opera, we had a ton of Japanese fans who would fly in, and we get to meet them at the stage door and all of that. And so even just sort of starting to gauge their reactions. Very early on, we would think, oh, is nobody out there? Because they were just very polite. That was part of the culture of watching shows, was to sort of wait until the end and then give the applause then, but not really to be super interactive throughout the show. And it's been fun, sort of seeing that evolve. In this last concert I did, people were standing up and dancing as like we were going through the aisles, and all of that was just sort of amazing to kind of watch that evolution, and to be so welcomed in by the audience members there.
You would never know that now that theater used to not be a huge thing there because like I feel like in the past like 10 years it's just like theater is like everything over there.
Yeah, it's incredible. And they do all of these new musicals too. I think they did
Yeah.
a production of Glory Days. They all of these things that didn't necessarily hit huge on Broadway. Japanese companies are producing over there, and they're bringing a lot of performers. And so I think it's been really interesting kind of watching them get excited, because back when I was doing the show, it was a Broadway review show, and so we would do things like, On the Street Where You Live, and Hello Dolly, and Make Believe from Showboat, and 42nd Street, and you could sort of see the audience being like, I'm not
Like going on.
entirely sure what that context is. I don't dislike it. I don't really understand it from a historical, musical
Yeah.
theater perspective. But I think now, more and more things are really kind of opening up over there, and it's really exciting.
Yes, I need to cross Japan off my bucket list sometime soon, especially because I found out that they have a Beauty and the Beast right at Tokyo Disneyland, and we don't have that here.
No.
Like, I've been saying it for years that we need it here, but we don't have it here, so I guess just have to go to Tokyo for it.
It's pretty, their Disney parks are pretty incredible. They're beautiful. I worked at Tokyo Disney Sea, which was, it was Disneyland and Disney Sea.
Ooh.
And they have an erupting volcano, and you can go and pretend like you're in Venice on a gondola and somebody will sing to you. They've got this amazing, I think it's still there, this great Little Mermaid show where she's on wires and is sort of swimming all throughout the air right in the center, and Ursula comes out from the side. It's really cool. They've got a lot of really great stuff.
They win, they win. I texted one of my friends who goes to Tokyo a lot, and I was like, next time I'm coming with you.
I approve.
I got it. So you're a fan favorite, Christine. I don't know if you think that or not, but based on what I've heard, you're a fan favorite, Christine, in Phantom of the Opera. What was your audition like for Phantom of the Opera on Broadway?
Oh, thanks, fans. So it was a long and epic journey. It took me honestly about 10 years of auditioning for various incarnations of the show to actually be cast in it. I auditioned for the first time when I was on that Les Mis tour, for Vegas. Actually, Sierra Vargas and I were co-Cosette understudies on that tour, and I
Oh
remember
my
when she
goodness.
booked it and how excited we all were for her, that she was going to do it. Yes, Sierra and I got into lots of fun background acting, on the
Oh,
Les stage, which is amazing. So we've been friends for a long time. But yeah, so I auditioned so many times for the show, for the Vegas production, for the Broadway cast, for the tour, for the Broadway cast again, for the tour again. And so by the time that my agents called for the time that I booked it, I was like, are you sure? I'm pretty
just
sure
for
that
real.
they've decided that they're not interested. I don't know. Because, of course, every time I went in, I would have this beautiful dream and get my hopes up and sort of fantasize about
Yeah.
what it would be like to actually book the show. And then it's hard when it comes, when you don't get it and then it comes down. Um, and so they said, just try it. You never know. Just show up. What's the worst that could happen? I was like, okay, fine. So I went in, I went into audition. The first audition, I remember I was waiting in the hallway, and the woman who was in there before me was in there for maybe 45 minutes, which is a really long time to be in a room for an audition. And she kept singing the songs over and over again. They would work on the sides. And usually that means that they're very interested in working with you because they want to keep trying new things and to see how you do with stuff. And that's a really good sign if you're in there for a long time. And of course, I was the person that went in next and was like, oh no, nobody wants to be the person after the person they're really interested in. And I walked in, and I was doing King and I on Broadway at the time, and they said, oh, Ali, how are you? How's King and I? Blah, 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 blah. Great to see you. Yada, yada, yada. Would you like to sing? And I was like, well, yes, I'm here. Yes, please. And so I sang Think of Me. And they said, great. Wow, you sound even better than you sounded before. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. It's so great to see you. And that was it. And so that was like my dismissal, right? And I left and I was furious. I was so angry.
So that's just, you're like, okay.
Right. So that was that. Like I was convinced. I was like, well, that's not happening. Like they might think that I sound great, but obviously they're not interested. And so I remember I stormed into, I had a rehearsal for a Sondheim concert. I stormed in and I said, I'm never putting myself through this again. I'm going to tell my agents no more, like no more sending me in for Phantom. I've had it. I've had it up. And then I went back and I was doing The King and I remember at it was a matinee, and I came back to the dressing room and I checked my phone, and there was a voicemail from my agent that said that I had a call back. And I heard this and I burst out laughing in the dressing room. And I'm pretty sure my dressing room mates thought I had completely lost my mind. They're like, what is she
What's
do?
wrong?
Why is she laughing? What's wrong with her? Um, and because I just thought that it was completely impossible, that there was no way that they were interested. And so thankfully I went in for this callback. It was great. I got to work on Think of Me and Wishing and the dressing room scene, that scene with Christine and Raoul. And we really worked through, I would sing the song and then they would give me some notes and then I would go back and do it again. And the same with the scene and the same with Wishing. And so I felt like I finally, had done some great work in the room. And whether or not, I was going to be right for it, fine, but at least I had been able to show them sort of my capabilities to be flexible, to tell the story and all of this. So then I left the Broadway production of The King and I was on a leave of absence to do a different production of The King and I at the Lyric Opera in Chicago, where I was going to be playing Tuptim. And so as soon as I got to Chicago, this was a couple of weeks later, I get a call from my agent saying, "Hey, Phantom would like you to come back to New York for a final callback for Hal Prince on stage at the Majestic," which is a thing that sort of happens in TV shows, but really not usually a thing that happens in real life. Um, Very rarely do you actually audition on a Broadway stage. Usually it's in, some sort of a rehearsal room or something somewhere. And of course, I was like, that is amazing. However, I just got to Chicago. Like, they couldn't have done this a week ago or, half a week ago, 3 days, any time before I had left. And so I had to go up to my director, Lee Blakely, who I never met before. And I was just working with him that first day. And thankfully, we'd all had this very casual conversation about Trader Joe's, and about what people liked at Trader Joe's. And Lee happened to mention that he liked mini crescent rolls at Trader Joe's. And so I had been released from rehearsal early, happened to meander over to the Trader Joe's, bought myself some groceries, bought some mini crescent rolls, like
Yes.
snuck back into rehearsal and waited until they were on a break. And once they were on a break, I, popped in and said, "Oh, hey, Lee, I happen to be, at Trader Joe's. I brought you these crescent rolls." And Lee, who is no fool, was like, "Oh, thank you. What do you
What's the news?
want? What's going on here? Tell me more." And so he's like, "Come into my office." And I told him the whole thing. I was like, they want me to go in for a callback. We're in the middle of rehearsals. It's going to be while we're in tech. Like, I don't know how I'm going to make this happen. Um, and he was like, "Don't worry about it." He was like, let's just keep this between us. I'm going to do my very best to make sure that you're not on the schedule that day. I'm going to make sure that we've scheduled other people to rehearse. And if for some reason that doesn't work out, you're just going to call out sick. And then you're going to come back in the next day and be miraculously feeling better. But you're going to go to New York and you're going to have this opportunity because I want that for you, which was so, so generous and kind. And really, like, I cannot thank him enough. And unfortunately, he has since passed away, but he did get to come and see me in Phantom, which was really, really cool and special, before all of that. But so I flew to New York, and I stayed overnight the night before, and I went in. I went to a rehearsal studio and warmed up, and got to the Majestic, and they had three of us auditioning for this final callback for Christine. So they had us in different dressing rooms. I happened to be up in the Raoul dressing room. My friend Jeremy Hayes was playing Raoul at the time, and he and I had done Les Mis together. So I have my like feet up on his counter, and I'm taking selfies, just to try and keep myself, loose and relaxed.
Yes.
And then they bring me down. It was the third one to audition, and I was standing, on the lip of the stage. There was no amplification, so I was just sort of right up against the edge. And the Hal Prince, the amazing, may he rest in peace, creator of all of these amazing theatrical, legendary works, was, sitting in the fifth row. And the chandelier was just sort of like in her resting position, which is not all the way up, is sort of halfway down, just right in my eye line. And they had me sing "Think of Me." And thankfully, I was able to sort of tap into this idea that, for this very long Phantom audition process journey, this counted as getting to sing the song on the stage for the man, and all of this, and just to really kind of enjoy myself and take it kind of for what it was. And afterwards, Hal was like, "Okay, great. I didn't understand this word. Let's go back through." And he kept stopping me, and we would go through different diction points, and I would try and enunciate even clearer because, he was sitting in the fifth
With
row.
you.
Yeah. And I was like, "That's fine. I can do that. Like, that's a note I can take. Perfectly happy to enunciate a little more. My childhood voice teachers would be proud." And so we went through the song that way. And then I did the dressing room scene. We had one of the swings from the show, Greg Mills, came out, and he and I read through the scene together, and Hal was like, "Pick up your cues, blah, 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 blah." And so we got to do it again. And then that was it. And then I left and flew back to Chicago. Um, and they called me maybe a week later, and I was in the middle of tech. And I came back and I checked my phone, and there was a voicemail from my agent saying, "Call me." And he said, "Okay, don't tell anybody." This was on a Friday. He's like, "Don't tell anybody, but Phantom is saying that they're going to call with an offer on Monday." And so I had to wait the entire weekend to get the official call. I know. After all, I mean, and of course, like I totally did tell people, but I had to very explicitly explain to my mother that, not telling anyone meant not posting it on Facebook, um, or sending
Yes,
out a
of
mass email
course.
or like all the texts or whatever. And then thankfully, Monday came and they did in fact make me an offer and we were able to work stuff out. And it was essentially as soon as they ended up having to extend the woman who was playing Christine on Broadway at the time, Julia Udine, for a couple of weeks to sort of make up for my King and I schedule, which was amazing that they were able to accommodate me that way. And so as soon as I was done, I flew to New York the night that we closed King and I, and the very next morning, I started rehearsals for Phantom. So it was pretty
Wow.
crazy.
How does a quick turnaround like that work to be doing one show and be one character and then have to learn a whole new show? And like, obviously, we were familiar with Phantom by that point, like, really familiar, but like to completely step into and learn another show that quickly.
Yeah, it was tricky. I had the score in my dressing room at King and I had a little piano in there, and so I would, be multitasking like when I wasn't on stage playing top to him. I was trying to learn because I knew sort of the big songs, but I didn't know a lot of the interim stuff and all of the dialogue in between and all that. And so I was just trying to kind of do two things at once and let my brain kind of work that way. And thankfully, I'd sort of gotten used to that process, particularly when I was doing King and I on Broadway because I was in the ensemble of that show. And so I had time to kind of do all of these other projects, either readings during the day or concerts on my off nights, and had gotten a little more used to the idea of sort of holding two characters in my head at once and being able to multitask that way. And I'm glad that I'd kind of worked on that muscle so that I was able to be prepared when I came in for rehearsal.
So you're like, one side of my brain is King and one side is Phantom.
Pretty much, yeah.
We're building the shows in different sides, so you don't get them mixed up and like they don't cross over into like a weird crossover of Phantom King and which might be
That
cool.
could be interesting. That could be interesting.
I mean, hey, crossover idea. Let maybe it'll happen sometime. No, I don't know. Crazy idea. So Phantom's such a three-dimensional show, and it's like so deep in the story. Just has so much depth in it. How did you work? What was the biggest challenge you faced when performing for Phantom and when telling the story to the audience night after night?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was, sort of what we were talking about is, not getting sucked into the icon kind of status of it and the images that I had in my mind of all of the Christines that I had seen in the past or sort of what that was. And instead, really connecting to her as a person and understanding her circumstance, right? Understanding the time period with which she lived in, right? And what those restrictions meant for how much agency she could have, but also sort of understanding the parts in which she did make decisions and she did choose to be with the Phantom or with Raoul or by herself or, all of these things, and kind of letting myself understand the story that way. But I'm not sure that I was fully prepared for how epic the role is. She barely leaves the stage. And usually when she does, she's having a full costume change. And the costumes are very heavy, mind you, or running up and
Yes.
down stairs or climbing up and down ladders or all of these things. And so it was really kind of an endurance test to get into both kind of the emotional space to be able to tell this very sort of fraught and present and heightened story all the time, and to sort of get my body in shape to be able to both sing that and do all of the running and picking myself up off the floor and dancing, and all of those things too. It was a really amazing endurance challenge for sure.
What's the heaviest costume in Phantom that Christine wears?
I think it's the wedding dress. I'm pretty sure at one point my dresser Mallory and I went through and weighed them all. And unfortunately, they were all not quite as heavy as we thought they were or they feel. But it was, I think at least 20 pounds, something like that.
Oh,
Which figure, is pretty significantly heavy, especially considering that there was a lot of, running and falling and then getting up with this, like, because not only was it heavy, but there was a bustle and then this long train, and so I couldn't walk backwards. I had to sort of kick the fabric to walk backwards, and even like getting up off the floor, it was challenging to not have my heel caught in sort of the hems of the dress or the cage that was, that was behind me, and sort of all of those things were really really challenging to navigate.
I mean, you're a rock star because wearing heels in any dress is hard for me. So like, I mean, I can't stand up when I'm wearing heels in anything, like without getting like stuck and falling down. So rock star there.
Thank you. I mean, I did fall down. Don't get me wrong. I definitely fell. That is a thing apparently that happens often with Christine's. So, I mean, I didn't fall all the time, but there were times for sure.
Yeah. I mean it happens. You're a person, it happens.
Yeah.
What was your favorite song to sing as Christine?
I just love wishing. I know I feel like that's sort of the set answer, but there's just something what's so great about wishing is that it has so many layers of, of the sadness and the longing and the dreaming, and then this agency of like deciding, to come into her own and deciding to stand on her own 2 feet. I think that that's such an exciting journey and satisfying journey to sort of dig in and play this moment where, she really wants to take charge of her life and is making her own decisions. It's epic in a really great way.
It's arguably one of the most stunning shows in musical theater history, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, one of the most stunning. So you obviously are no stranger to singing high notes. How do you do that, and how do you work on vocal stamina when you're in shows and singing like you do in shows like Les Mis and West Side Story and Katie and I and Phantom?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it kind of has to do with just how I'm built. I was told by a voice teacher that I have a very small larynx. That it's just like it's petite in width, and sort of long, and and that kind of sets me up. You
Yeah.
can hear it in my speaking voice. Like I've always been a soprano. That is sort of where my voice lies naturally. And then obviously it's been years of study and sort of being consistent about warming up, be it lip trills or humming or with a straw, all of those things to sort of make sure all of that is accessible up there, and continuing to fine tune that and to work with different voice teachers, and so it's been sort of a long process that thankfully I was kind of primed for, because again that is sort of where my voice lives. What was even more challenging in some ways with Phantom was how low some of the parts are. You listen to All I Ask of You, and Christina's down in the basement in certain moments, and so sort of expanding my range downward while still being able to kind of keep the upper notes as well. All of that has been sort of a life, I think a lifelong study, and trying to just make sure that that I'm doing things in a way where I'm supported by my breath, and I'm working on all of those things, and that that I don't have a lot of neck tension, all of those things that we sort of learn in voice lessons, and being very conscious of making sure that it's all in a supported and healthy way.
I feel like it seems the hardest. Like anyone who's able to sing and keep a tune for a whole show impresses me, but I feel like it always has seemed the hardest to me to like not strain when you're a soprano versus like when you're singing at some other range. Like
Yeah.
it's impressive.
Thanks. Thanks. I mean, it's funny, like it's sort of the thing that I know, but I think there is like what's challenging, right, is that it's a little more removed from how we speak,
Yeah.
because it's in this higher, like this head voice land, as opposed to this like frontal belty place. But I have to give credit my to Dr. Valentino, who was my first voice teacher, who did everything in high school. He used to make us promise to give him 10% in all the credit, and I have not been doing the 10%, but he really like gave me this amazing foundation, that I've then been able to kind of build upon, and really helped me
And
fine tune.
look at your career now.
Indeed,
I
indeed.
mean, it speaks to how good he was at helping you fine tune and everything, because your voice is perfect.
Thank you, thank
Do you
you.
have a favorite stage door experience or fan experience out of any show that you've done?
Oh gosh, what is my favorite? I don't know. There's so many. I mean, it was so special doing Phantom, because of sort of the nature of our fans and how well they know the show and how enthusiastic they were and how they come from all over the world. That was really exciting. We had this amazing woman named Naomi who would come from Japan. She would come like every couple of months with a giant suitcase filled with these incredible rice crackers. They were like little, individually wrapped, prepackaged Japanese rice crackers. And she would come for like a week of shows and every day kind of hand us out these amazing, and they were pre-wrapped. So, they were safe and we all knew her and all of that. But it was so sweet of her just to give us a little treat every night after the show. And I loved having, those things. Not that, people giving me presents is a requirement for having a favorite fan interaction. But it was, but also, I mean, it's also very nice. But that was really special, was actually getting to know particularly the people that would come over and over again, and getting to know them by name, and really just like, all the fan art that I received, I was totally blown away by. I put it up all over my dressing room. I still have it in a binder here, and just anything that, where people take the time to show their appreciation for you, I think is so special. I mean, so much of what I do feels incredibly selfish. I love to sing. I love to tell stories on stage, and the fact that, that I might be having an impact on somebody else is this amazing sort of broader impact that is incredibly fulfilling and really kind of people to be able to reach out and say those things.
And you were an impact to so many people, especially like I feel like in the theater world, because like they're like, oh, well, I could play Christine someday too. You broke a barrier when you started playing Christine. You're, I mean,
Yeah.
you were the first Asian American to play Christine, right?
Yeah, on Broadway.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And I know, in my own experience, sort of what that meant, right? We were talking about Dee Dee and Jenny Kwan, like what it meant to see people that look like me achieving things on stage. I acknowledge that, for most people, it's really important to have that sort of representation because it opens up your mind to what could be possible, and helps you to sort of dream and believe in things. And I'm fortunate to have had that example in my own life, and for people to have said that, that I've had that impact on them as well, is just incredibly, I'm honored to be part of that journey.
I love that so much. Is there any role that you'd love to take on, and like maybe the barrier hasn't been broken yet, but you'd love to like break the barrier for that role and like show fans of that show that like anyone can play this part?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm sort of open to anything at this point. There are a bunch that I still haven't, I've been able to check a lot of the dream roles off. But things like, Marion in Music Man, or Amalia and She Loves Me, or those ones I haven't gotten to dig into like my soprano chops into. And then I'm just really excited about new work too. I've been able to do these great shows with my friend Jason Ma has been writing these really amazing musicals. The show Gold Mountain we got to do in Utah a couple years ago, and we're hoping to do again soon. And it's about the Chinese workers who helped build the Central Pacific Railroad, and who have sort of been forgotten by history, but really were incredibly critical. And so getting to work on shows from the ground up that way too, and to get to tell these stories that maybe haven't been heard, is really exciting to me as well.
Yes, I love new work and original shows. Like these long running shows, I mean, they're long running for a reason, but we definitely need to keep the new work coming.
Yes, absolutely.
So, do you have kind of fun question? Do you have a fun fact or hidden talent about yourself that maybe people wouldn't know?
Interesting. Fun. I mean, I guess, well, I played the oboe. I don't know that that's really a hidden talent anymore because I'm pretty sure that I'm not capable of it. But you can sort of tell, I don't know how to show you this. Like my thumbs are still kind of different sizes. This one's a little bit wider, because it was the thumb that I held the oboe up with. But I got to play in like all county, it was like the all Westchester Youth Symphony. And I was in, this is a funny fun fact. I was in a woodwind quintet when I was in high school, and my dad named us the Pleasant Winds, which, maybe in retrospect, not the best name, but we had matching dresses, and we played a couple of different, we played some holiday parties, and like, I think we played like one anniversary, sort of vowel renewal thing. And But it was a really fun, it was actually really amazing sort of for my musicianship and getting to play in an ensemble and to work with other people that way.
I'm sure your parents were like, let's book her for this and this. They're like your agents at the time, like booking you for different gigs.
I mean, I have to say, like, they were never stage parents, sort of in the great set, like in the way that they never pushed me for things, but they have been so supportive, and they will come to everything, and usually multiple times. And, it's rare for my mom not to see a show that I'm doing at least, on a like 5 show weekend, and then again and again and again after that. They've been really awesome.
I mean, how can you not go see a Broadway show or any theater show multiple times?
It's true.
You have to have
It's
self
true.
control to not go see it that much.
Agreed.
How do you work on self confidence in a tough industry like the theater industry and entertainment industry?
It's a process. I think it's one of those things to acknowledge that, that we all have difficulty with it, that I struggle with my confidence. Just about everybody I know, no matter how famous or successful or how many things they've accomplished, I think that it's something that everybody goes through. So part of it is just kind of acknowledging that it's okay to have, those feelings of self-doubt or imposter syndrome or any of those things. And then, the thing that I've try to continue to work on as much as possible is to just not get stuck in this comparing loop of, comparing myself to other people, both in terms of career, like general careers or jobs or voices or looks or any of that stuff, and to really kind of continue to remind myself that, what I have to offer is totally different from what anybody else has to offer. And that means that my journey is going to be different. It means that, they might get cast or I might get cast, but it's never actually a competition in that way, that I can root for them and all of their success, and their success doesn't take away from my success. And I think that, as much as I can continue to do that, has been really, really helpful. And also just, valuing the things that I know that are specific to me, that I know that, that I do well, and continuing to strengthen those gifts, and to be able to share them with the world in a way that I know, nobody else can do exactly in that way. I think kind of takes the pressure off of feeling totally inadequate at all times. And also, like, celebrating the small accomplishments. Like, I think that that's part of it too, right? Like, just the idea that, that I got up and sang a song today during the pandemic feels like a huge accomplishment. Or that I was brave enough to go to an audition, where I wasn't sure that I was going to get it, and was able to sing in front of people. Like, that counts, right? We don't only have to celebrate the booking of the Broadway show. We can celebrate the, like, being brave enough to, like, learn a new song, or to, to sing in a new environment, or to, like, forge a new connection, or any of those things.
Yes.
I think we have to, in the way that we would celebrate our friends, but we're sort of afraid to celebrate ourselves. I think that there's really something wonderful about, being being proud, and, being proud of little things, and letting that be okay. And that doesn't mean that we're bragging, and it doesn't mean that, we're all self-consumed, but just that, that we're honest about also the positive things that we get to do.
We gotta brag about small accomplishments sometimes. We gotta. And
Yeah.
it's important to not. You talked about comparing. I feel like that's one of the most important things when it comes to self confidence. Not compare yourself to others, because with social media nowadays, we're
It's
all like,
so easy. Yep.
yeah, we're all like, well, this person looks like she has a better life on social media than me. So like, but it's all like a subjective to
Yeah.
what you're seeing on social media and what people are doing.
Absolutely. Social media is totally curated, right? Like, we're only putting out into the world, and I know this is true of myself, the things that, like, I really want people to
Yeah.
see. More often than
Yes.
not, it's not like not the ugly, insecure, whatever, all the, the failures or all of that stuff. And I think that, if that's true of me, I would imagine it's true of most people as well. And just because somebody looks like they have it all on social media doesn't necessarily mean that they feel super happy and fulfilled inside. And so it feels like a waste of time to want somebody else's life when you really don't know what it's like, unless you're, in their shoes.
Yes. Well, to wrap up, this might be a more complex question than I originally typed it out to be. What are you most excited about when theater comes back?
Ooh, that is a complex question. I'm personally excited to sit in a theater and like watch people. I mean, I want to be on stage, but I also just want to be, to be in the same room where art is happening, where collaboration is happening. I miss so much getting to go see shows. I love sitting in theaters and having these amazing collective cathartic experiences with the people around me and watching great artists do their work on stage. And I'm also, I'm hopeful that all of these conversations that we're having, during this time when we haven't been able to make theater will make for a more inclusive environment, will make for a world in which representation is much more at the forefront of what we're doing, where, the things that we're seeing on our big commercial Broadway stages are reflective of the world that we live in all of its complexity and all of its diversity. And that we'll continue to push for, for stories that are from different kinds of storytellers, from people with different life experiences. And I think that'll be really exciting as audience members to get to learn about different types of people and to create this great empathy and to understand, the ways in which we connect and the ways in which we can learn more about the world. I think that there's such a great opportunity now because we've had to kind of step back to really make beautiful, intentional art that includes as many people as possible.
Yes, and I feel like people who go to theater, we learn so much from theater. Like, God knows, when I went to see Hades Town, like, I learned more than I ever learned in school about Greek mythology from that show. To be
Yeah.
honest.
No, it's so true. I mean, the same, like there are all these amazing history lessons. Like think about like how many people have learned real things about American history through Hamilton. There are
Right.
these such great opportunities. And then to learn about, I remember watching Allegiance and really understanding what the internment camps were like in a way that I never was able to from just reading it in a book. Like when we see it embodied by
Yeah.
human characters, telling these stories through music, through things that really speak to our souls, it really sort of sticks and has the ability to change us in really positive, amazing ways.
For sure, for sure. And then lastly, have you been working on anything in quarantine, whether it's theater related or not, that you'd want to promote or talk about?
Oh gosh, I mean, not really. I feel like I've done little things throughout. One of the things that I'm proudest about was back in the fall, I did a mini musical with Prospect Theater Company called or Lady Lawyer Lockwood Rides Her Tricycle. And it was about this woman named Belva Lockwood who was the first woman to argue a case before the Supreme Court. She ran for president in 1884 and 1888 before she was eligible to vote for president. And so we made this tiny brand new musical through Prospect Theater Company, and it was really fabulous. And we actually got to collaborate in real time, and we filmed it, and so now it's on YouTube. But so that was really cool. I don't know. I made like a silly silly sing along in my neighborhood in Pleasantville where I sang Les Mis out of like the roof of my car. You know, there hasn't been a lot of things like super lately. I think I've kind of ebbed and flowed in my creativity, but those are some really kind of amazing things that kind of bridge the lack of creativity in my life. And so those are on YouTube. Check those out.
I'll put the links in the description to them so people can check them out. What
Awesome. Thank you.
what where can people follow you on social media to keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm at Ali Ewoldt, ALIEWOLDT on Instagram and Twitter. I have a fan page on Facebook and a website that is www.aliewoldt.com, which probably is not nearly as updated as my Instagram page. So probably Instagram.
Well, I'll put all the links again in the description. And thank you so much for coming on to talk with me on my show today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This was such a pleasure.
Thanks for watching this episode of Backstage with Becca B. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Becca B Talks TV. Or for more exclusive content from this interview and more, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Backstage with Becca B. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video.